Anything you want.
One thing I'll say is that I appreciated is that, Wanda was like doing this whole white picket fence thing that turned out to be a disaster. And I loved it because I think that so many people limit themselves and that's the only picture of happiness. Like in the future, marriage, like I wish we would have talked more about like even the institution of marriage and like how that does that have to be the goal of every relationship. But I think that in that was just so beautifully done on so many levels. But I think that's part of it that I appreciated. I am married. I'll just say that. Like it's not, oh my God, death to marriage, but that's not everybody's like what everybody wants, nor do I feel like it should be like what everybody aspires to. Because then when you don't get there, it's like, oh my God, I'm terrible. Nobody wants me. And so I appreciated that whole white picket fence thing just blew up because I think that again, there's other things to aspire to,
Well, the idea that can fix you.
Yes.
Like if you finally get that, then all your mental health stuff will go away and all your other problems will go away. And that is sometimes it's just like the show, just shoving it down until it explodes.
And I wouldn't be doing my due diligence as a grief researcher and therapist if I didn't say it, because I'm like, oh, I have to for WandaVision. But something that I didn't get to say when we were discussing WandaVision last time was there has been technology in which there's a lot of VR, in which you can program for VR for individuals who you've lost. And so it's, in my interpretation of WandaVision, it's almost very similar to this like simulated experience of being with somebody, and how do we perceive loss, and do we say that that person's not grieving appropriately because they want to stay in that experience, or is that healthy, is it helping or healthy? I think it's complex, and particularly for grief and loss, it's your own unique journey, and I think that as therapists we assign psychopathology to it. And so I was just like, oh, it's so interesting to think that there are people who are helped by this, but her version was a bit more extreme because other people were at risk. But with the VR interacting with lost children or lost parents or lost spouses or friends, families, whatever, pets, animals, it's interesting. Sorry, we should go back to relationships.
Oh, that is relationships. These are relationship issues.
Yeah, like the complicated grief is part of a relationship. If you lose them suddenly, I think that's a huge part of relationships, whether it be intimate relationships or your family members.
Because I mean, in comics, the only people who stay dead, even though they've visited at times, Uncle Ben, Gwen Stacy, and Bruce Wayne's parents, and you can still run into a clone, an alternate universe version or whatever, but they stay dead because their deaths are very important in defining our protagonist.
Yeah.
And anybody else can come back from the dead. Bucky stayed dead an incredibly long time because his death was important in defining the modern Captain America. Captain America had been a pretty flat character, in his original stories, but then, Stan and Jack and company bring him back in the 60s, and he's defined by being a man out of time and his guilt over the lost partner, which was a father, it's more like a big brother, little brother kind of relationship in the old comics. It wasn't quite as father-son as Batman and Dick Grayson was, but it's still, they're defined by relationships. So I mean, love, we've been talking love in the romantic sense mainly, love in its connection with sex life, because it is sex, love, and superheroes, but there are many kinds of love. And this comment I'd made earlier about people who can't look at a loving relationship without thinking they see something sexual there.
Yeah.
Like you can get into arguments about, the people who want to say Wincest, they're going to look at that loving relationship between those brothers and they're determined to see something sexual there. And maybe some of the writers play to that. Who knows? Although we of course, the
fanfic,
the Destiel. It's like, why Sam said, why isn't it pronounced Destiel? But yeah, we know Cass acknowledged those were his feelings.
Yes. Destiel was beautiful. And I don't want to yuck anybody's yum. If Wincest is your jam, that's your jam. And also, I think going to what you're saying, Travis, like we also need to have some room for nuance, and that sometimes love is platonic. And that platonic love is
Yeah.
really powerful and wonderful. It's not any less than romantic love.
Yeah.
Yes, I think the friends with benefits for Harley and Ivy. Oh, I think it's great. I think that's a wonderful story and very, very good for a lot of people. I think it's also good to see a strong, loving connection between characters and recognize that it can be something else. We need both. We need people to see both instead of repeatedly as, oh, we've got to see something sexual here. I think some people, it's just because of their own lives, their own experience doesn't prepare them to separate. But maybe they didn't have a loving family relationship, or maybe, I'm not saying it had to have been sexualized. I just wonder, since there are many kinds of love.
Well, it reminds me of what Dr. Vanessa was saying earlier of, do we prioritize marriage and prioritize long-term commitment, as opposed to, do we see that the on again, off again with Batman and Catwoman, is it worthy enough? And then they finally get together. Like, how do we see these relationships as valuable, regardless if they're platonic or intimate or sexually based or romantically based? There's a lot of comparison of, well, this relationship isn't as meaningful because it's not long-term. And the unfortunate reality, or it's not even unfortunate, the reality is that all relationships come to us in different ways and have different value. And sometimes something that's short can be wonderful. Sometimes something that's long can be wonderful, and the opposite can be true. And so I appreciate that DC has moved more to it, and then Marvel allows for a lot of their heroes to have lots of different relationships, because the end all be all isn't you have to be married to this person and this is the way that it should be, because life is not like that, or else we would all be partnered up and forever, and that's just it, and there's no opportunity for divorce or reconciliation or anything. And so the complexities of life are mirrored in the complexities of the comics.
Well, it's like with no, go ahead, Brittany.
Because I was speaking of, like you say, the Marvel, like the fact that Clint and Natasha could have very easily been a romantic couple, and instead I like the twist that he already has his own thing going on, and then that they have such a strong, open, like sibling-esque relationship, and it's given so much gravity and weight, like in the last
You froze
movie about who jumps over the Clint. And it's so respected and given that weight, even though it's not romantic. I think a lot of times we think that those relationships have to be romantic to be so treasured, and they treasure each other so much, and they're not romantic.
Actually, in the comics, her first romantic relationship depicted was with him. She had like teased Tony Stark when she first appeared as a spy in an Iron Man comic, but her first relationship was with Hawkeye. What were you saying, Angela?
That was the exact example I was going to give, because I was like, that was the value of like the two of them having to make the choice, and who was it going to be in terms of being able to get the Soul Stone,
and
like
then fighting to be the one, right?
Showing that was so mutual too between them in terms of what they felt, but that it wasn't sexual. That I was thinking a little bit more about our, like, why do we want to know so much about the sex lives of superheroes? And I was thinking about how much it's about that they're so attractive physically. Like, there's just this idea that is the ultimate in terms of physical attraction, and then that being so quickly bridged over to like sex, basically. And it, we didn't get a chance to kind of talk about it, but I was thinking about how much that actually can be either, like, where does that kind of lead us as the consumers? I literally had a client this week in practice who has, he's a guy with body image issues related to a number of things, but was talking about intimacy with his wife and was like, am I supposed to be Superman? Like, am I supposed to look like that? And I was like, oh my goodness. Like, like, so that too being a like, oh geez, that can have that kind of effect on us as well.
Yeah, one of our audience comment I didn't get to read. Was that a dog? One audience comment I didn't get to read was agreed. I think it was something we said early. Whitney Weston, yes, we sexualize superheroes because they are hot. Do you think psychologically that was intentional, and why? Well, I think they are intentionally drawn to, have those ultimate Greek statue physiques. Yeah.
I was talking to Angela this morning, and we're talking about with Deadpool. And in the movie, how his relationship is highly sexualized, and then he gets cancer, and then he goes through the procedure, and then he's just like, now I can't even talk to her, and he's so ashamed and embarrassed by the way he looks.
Mm-hmm. The one thing in that first movie that I thought was out of character for Deadpool was on International Women's Day when she's got the strap on and he's going, nope. I don't see Deadpool saying no on that.
Don't either.
I
don't either.
Pegged many a time. That was not a first for him.
Yeah. I was like, wait, what? No, you wouldn't say that.
Say Shaft's World. I was just saying that telepathic sex was examined in Legion, and that also had some issues around consent. And does the person even have the ability to turn off their telepathy? In which case, it's like resenting them for being able to see you. I didn't let you see me. Well, that's how these eyes work. If they have the ability to turn it on and turn it off, decide what to pay attention to, yeah, there are issues. It's like your thoughts are supposed to be your own private things.
I mean, even like in What Women Want, they kind of go over that in that movie because of what that does for him. Yeah, the women get to enjoy what he's doing. Oh, you like it when I do this, and whether it's sexually or just doing the laundry. Mm-hmm. Right, he was altering his behaviors because he knew those inside secrets.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And well,
as if you can say that stuff out loud and get the same outcome with your partner.
Yeah,
right.
Of course, that can also be kind of, the more you talk, is like people are just shut up and do it. So somebody could, or they resent you for having to repeatedly ask when you should just know.
Nice should statement.
There are plenty of people who expect the other person to just know. If you have to ask why I'm mad, or if you have to ask what I want, it's like,
that's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite haikus is, oh, she wants me to love her the way that she would love her if she were me. So it's this idea that we have this perfect perception of how someone could love us and read our mind.
Yeah. In therapy with clients, I call that rom-com disorder.
Yes. Yes.
I'm like, friend, I'm afraid you've got rom-com disorder. Your partner does not know what you want.
That's a good way to put it.
But that, I was thinking too a little bit of this kind of goes back to the ideas of like what's healthy in a relationship. I was, as a trauma specialist, I do cognitive processing therapy a lot, and I like that the sequence of the concepts is like safety, trust, power and control, esteem, and last, intimacy. And you could say like it's not necessarily like that they have to build on each other, but they really, really do. And I was thinking about those, in terms of trauma recovery and how so much of those different constructs come up for, survivors who are, working on relationships or are already in relationships. And I was thinking about that, like, what's that look like in the building of those constructs in a relationship with a superhero? Like maybe the ultimate in terms of safety, but is there really trust if you don't know really who they are? And then, wow, power and control, and like it just all kind of goes from there.
I think that's also one of the reasons that I could just speak for myself, but a lot of superheroes are so attractive because you know that they'll be able to protect you. And so there's never, I don't say never, but very rarely will you have a question about safety. And so I know that that's not something we got to talk about live either, but I do think that there's something attractive about security, which is sort of what they offer in a very tangible, physical way. And there are ways to offer that emotionally as well, which is, I think, what we do when we work with couples, right? Like you can feel emotionally secure also. And so, but I do think that there's something about that just on a very like sort of evolutionary level that it like is attractive. You know what I'm saying?
Almost like fetishizing in a way. Just
Yes.
like, this is so, if you want to call it sexy or attractive or alluring, but something that popped up in my head, Angela, is understanding shared experience. And so I'm wondering, if you are with someone with powers, is it similar to someone in a different community that you are in? Like, so if I am dating someone of a different diversity background, if I'm dating someone with a different disability background, if I'm dating someone with, and just in a different community of mine, how do those challenges apply, or would they be similar? If I start dating Aquaman now, is that going to be the same as if I were to be dating someone of a different ethnicity?
Sorry, I got a little warm when we talked about, and I'm definitely thinking of Momoa.
I know.
I was wondering, I was like, which one are you talking about?
The one that rides dolphins.
I actually really liked Arthur Curry in Smallville, though, for example, just all blonde and surfery. But I grew up
He
in
was
Southern
actually one of the
California.
more buff superheroes too.
Yeah, but Momoa is totally also.
Or is it like dating a celebrity?
Right.
Well, so that was the other thing I was thinking about, in that, esteem, being a thing that I was just like, wow, also, what's that like for somebody who doesn't have powers? Are there the potentials for, all the types of insecurities, but even like body image insecurity, and that sexual part being like difficult to be naked in the bedroom with, somebody whose physique is supposed to be perfect, does Lois ever feel that when she's in the bedroom with, Clark Kent?
And is the assumption that we immediately go to everything of theirs is perfect? And perfect in what way? And so, to be explicit, like, what is the perfect penis size? What is the perfect like vulva? What is the perfect amount of breast tissue? Like, what do we see as like these parameters of like of their body?
That's where we get into talking about characters like Elongated Man and Plastic Man, because they can work with that.
I'd be nervous being naked around Wonder Woman. I would feel very self-conscious.
Yeah. I feel very self-conscious around Black Widow.
You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying.
And it also makes you think about like the masculinity role, and how all these guys are supposed to be big, strong, powerful, and take care of your girl. But then, my girl Starlight, and she can just like destroy all the electronics around me. Right. So and because you see that with Huey, right? Like, he's kind of like a little more meek as a male when you first meet him. And so he falls for this girl and he starts dating her, but he's just himself, because he's just like, this is just who I am. And he's okay with, and he's comfortable with who he is. Whereas another guy might get really insecure and start pushing away.
Well, there's something sexy about danger. People will be attracted to a dangerous person. There's whole research on why the appeal of the bad boy. If you say bad girl, you mean it. It's the term bad girl is based on something different from what people mean by bad boy. With bad girl, it's a different kind of connotation. It's that bad boy you're kind of talking about. Maybe they're not sociopaths, but there's something that comes across as kind of sociopathic. That indifference or lack of worry about things, can be mistaken for confidence, or could be confidence. And there's something appealing about that. I that was one of my first thoughts back when she brought up Eric Killmonger, as to what the appeal on that character is, even aside from the fact that, well, everybody likes Michael B. Jordan.
Beautiful person.
Yummy. Oh dear.
Eric O'Sullivan commented on Twitter, I just want to say Ralph and Sue Dibney were a favorite of mine growing up. It's a shame that what DC did to them in between Identity Crisis and 52. They haven't even had a new version of them in the last 8 years. He's asking, right? So yeah, Ralph and Sue Dibney, one of his earliest appearances was when they got married. He's actually the first superhero in comics to get married. People will argue with me about this. So they'll say, oh, Bullet Man and Bullet Girl. Retroactively, with that story that was introduced later on. Hot Man and Hot Girl, retroactively later on. Ralph and Sue were the first ones for a superhero to get married. And actually, she had very briefly been a costume hero herself. And so, but for them, I think one of the things since in the last 9 years now, 10 years, New 52 was October of 2011. They had an editorial mandate. They didn't want the superheroes married. But Ralph had been defined. He had this thin man movie kind of relationship with his wife, as they'd been defined by that relationship in the stories. And I think in the last decade, they haven't known what to do with the happily married couple. And now because of some things coming out about the guy playing Ralph, who really looks like the character from the comics, we're not going to see the Ralph-Sue relationship really play out on The Flash anymore.
No.
John Costello asked, is there going to be a Batgirl big screen movie where they explore her sex life, love life? The TV doesn't have the best track record with Batgirl or Batwoman so far. It depends on who's telling the story. Batgirl is one that somehow she has generally not been defined by her romantic relationships over the years. Her most frequent relationship has been with Dick Grayson. They've been engaged before, but she's been defined by herself as a strong individual, even if she's taken a costume from having been a fan of Batman. She was not a romantic interest for him at the beginning. When they touched on that in like animated series season 4 or maybe it was a movie later, flashback later on, it creeps some fans out. Is that's not her role in stories we want to look at. And maybe it's they feel like giving her a relationship like that would detract from the strength they see in her. I don't know.
Yeah, they did in the Batman the Killing Joke, where she has like a sexual relationship
in the movie. Yeah.
Yeah. With Batman, that complicates like power dynamics and inevitably ends up messing up their relationship.
Yeah, she got involved with a friend of her dad's.
That's
well, it's funny too.
This is a big topic for Travis.
I was curious about your opinion on Travis, but like I was reading when they announced it at Comic-Con and they did the world premiere for it, and Bruce Timm was there, and this guy went to the thing. He's like, "How could you do that?" He's like, "Well, it empowers her. Batgirl's more empowered. She uses her strength, and she doesn't just bow to people. Like she chooses who she wants to be with, and that was his justification. And that was her strength of it, and not just having sex with Batman because he's Batman."
Yeah, I give that a.
I think it's a whole cop out. I don't agree with it because I'm a huge fan. That's my favorite comic of all time. Like most people, they love it. Yes. I have 2 copies in my office, so I can give them to veterans. Mm-hmm. And so to see that when it first came out, like I bought the DVD, didn't even open it, almost threw it away. I was so bummed about it.
Oh.
No, I mean, in The Killing Joke, her role is to be victimized.
Yeah.
In the original graphic novel, her role is to be victimized. Not even as Batgirl, it's as Barbara Gordon. The fact that she's Batgirl is incidental in here. It's they threw that character, the Batgirl character, away at that time, and then it so outraged the Ostranders they turned her into Oracle 2 years later. Mm-hmm. And she originally stayed Oracle longer than she had been Batgirl compared to real time, and she was a very strong role model for many people, or just a strong, wonderful character as Oracle, and many people still miss her as Oracle. And DC keeps going back and forth and trying to figure out how to have both the Batgirl who can run around and walk and the Oracle. That's the sex life with Batman, that being the thing to empower. There are a lot of other things you could have done in Power besides making it sexual in her life.
You know, another part of his thing was that he said that in the 66 with Adam West that it was there. That there were like hints of it, and I was like, I don't recall that.
The only hints were that Adam found her sexy.
Yeah, but not Batman and Batgirl. So that was another thing that kind of bummed me out when I read that, and that was part of his justification.
I'm trying to think of if the justification is that it empowers her, it's because the reaction was that he felt shame and then she was experiencing it as, oh, it was just something, let's still work together, like it's okay, like maybe because her perception of the encounter wasn't devastating, and so it seemed like she was able to like work together and work efficiently after a one-night stand, or after, you know, like what happens in real life, like drunken hookups and stuff like that, whereas he struggled. So I think maybe trying to pull his strings, like maybe.
But when does it happen, right? He kicks her off of the case, and then she uses the
That too.
sexuality to kind of justify, like, oh,
Yeah.
you want to do this to me? I'm gonna do this to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very irritated by it.
One person gave me a question that for this topic, but it's like, how will Black Widow change filmgoers' perspective for entertainment with stream networks? That's not a topic for this one. I think I'm gonna have to edit out me saying this because he's a nice guy who says this. This would be a topic for when we do the Black Widow the Black Widow movies several weeks from now. Yes?
I was just curious because, you know, Brittney had mentioned grief earlier, and I was wondering about how you view like Mr. Freeze or Frank Castle with it and how they handle it.
And of course, both of them, the loss of their, well, of course, Mr. Freeze had no origin. He had a weak origin. He didn't really, he was a two-dimensional character, originally Mr. Zero, a different alter ego and all, until say one of the two biggest additions that Batman the Animated Series made was creating Harley Quinn and giving Mr. Freeze this backstory that made him the most poignant villain in the bunch. And with both Frank Castle and Mr. Freeze, the woman they love, her death is part of his origin. With Nora Freeze, not that she was dead, but she was effectively dead and stored as a statue, you know. And so that's their background. Bruce Wayne's parents get killed. Frank's Castle's family gets killed, not just the wife, but it's to empower the man. The women, well, the Helena Bertinelli Huntress, her entire family had gotten wiped out. So it was also with the female hero, which is, I think, just because there's so many more male heroes than female heroes, there's one reason we're going to see more of the women killed off in their histories, because of that lopsided aspect of it. But there are reasons we talk about women in refrigerators, about the female characters getting killed off, you know, to motivate the male character. Which, any of you seen the version of Deadpool 2 in which he's telling the story to Fred Savage?
Mm-hmm.
And Fred is, spoiler alert on Deadpool 2. Fred is like, you fridged Vanessa? And Deadpool is like, what? It's like, no, this is a common, this is a thing. And Fred is telling him about all these stories, a term that comes from Gail Simone talking about women in refrigerators, which just this list that started her which kind of led to her becoming a comic book writer, one of the best known, highly in demand. And I'm just noticing, you know, how long we've been at this still. Do y'all have any? There are so many things we can get into these topics. When you go to start with relationships alone, you can have an entire degree in relationships, and then we throw in the super stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think one trope we haven't talked about yet is what I think makes superheroes attractive. Something I see when I'm in within the fan community, especially in like fanfic and stuff, is wanting to save like the broken archetype superhero, like the Bucky Barnes type. I always call them the Bucky Barnes types, and be like, I can save them, I can turn them around. And it's such an interesting, you could say a lot about why that's appealing to certain people, because that also connotates like a power dynamic of I'm going to save them, but that also is uneven and can get messy too.
Wanting to save somebody is easy. It's even in the appeal of the bad boy. Going back to that trope, it's maybe you want to save them and help them be a better person, or help bring out the best in them. And there are a lot of reasons. We want to feel special. We want to feel we've mattered in that other person's life. Mm-hmm. And something like that, like the wounded warrior, there's something that seems like an obvious way to matter in that person's life.
Mm-hmm. And I think it also is a little dangerous, and then it promotes this relationship dynamic where maybe they can be not nice to you or unkind to you or mistreat you because they're a work in progress. And if you just stay in there and like are nice enough and sweet enough and open enough and available enough, you'll get to the other side of that. And I know we do see that happen, and that is possible. And it is this very almost dangerous message of just stick it out and put up with it, because there's like a golden goose at the end.
Ugh,
Which
totally
probably in real life practice, not quite.
Yeah, Doctor Strange, when he's wounded, he's being a jerk to everybody in his life, but we particularly see it with the woman who's kind of his love interest. But well, it's okay because he's this bad point in his life, and for her, staying with him at all through that just speaks to her strength, supposedly.
No.
There is. They have, from the audience point of view, the storyteller's point of view, the one who is wounded has this permission to be a jerk, and in real life there's a degree where somebody has gone through this wound that other people don't understand. They feel a need to express it somewhere, and they're not in their usual state. They haven't been prepared for how they're supposed to act. What's the etiquette of expressing your frustration?
And that's a big part of the population I work with. They don't know how to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
They don't want to open up about feelings. A lot of them get told that they're going to get divorced unless they go seek help. And rarely do those people stick out treatment. They got to hit their version of wanting to get better. And that's where it really comes from with the population that I work with, especially just because it's all wounded warriors. That's who I work with. PTSD, trauma. So it's hard. It's very hard to, like, if I open up, what does that mean about me? Right. And then it goes back to the masculine role of, like, in combat, in the Marine Corps, I'm Superman. I can't die. And I have to remind them that there's kryptonite. You know, and part of being vulnerable is, you know, what brings you to humanity.
Ooh, well said.
Now you can cut it all out.
I was also thinking, just if we're talking about a systemic perspective of how do you navigate not just a relationship with a super, but also if you have children. And so, because it is different to love super, but to raise super, like, how does that change your perspective of the family dynamic? What is safe? Safety is a big one. How to be protective, how to be compassionate, where do you draw the line? I think there's lots of boundary setting and family dynamics if this were to apply to a family.
It'd be hard to navigate the boundaries of secret keeping with your kids. Like, you don't want to promote secret keeping, and there'd have to be possibly a certain level of that in order to keep them safe.
And it depends on when the kids
space at home.
And when do the kids get the powers, right? Like, if they're like Wanda and Visions, they're kind of there right away. If they're like Superman and Lois, you know, they slowly develop, just like Clark did in Smallville. And Lois has this role in their life until all of a sudden they find out that the one you don't think is going to have powers has powers. And then that one's closer to Clark. And they're spending a lot more time together and kind of alienating the other one.
Yeah, I think they're doing a nice job of that on that show. You know, really just a lot of the issues around, like, family dynamics and what that would be like, because we're talking about, like, there's a lot of things that need to be there in terms of healthy relationships. But yeah, that, you know, goes back to our conversation of, like, prioritization, you know, in terms of partnership and your kids, and, like, how would a superhero be able to balance that, you know, well enough, you know? And so, like, seeing a little bit more of that really coming out for Superman in that show, where there's this real, like, no, I am going to put my kids first, you know, and having that fight with General Lane, you know, of, like, no, you don't get to tell me that I have to make sure that the rest of the world is safe and then my family, like, which I was like, oh, hey, that's cool.
Travis, that makes me think of, like, your veteran people, especially if your third, fourth generation going into the military? Like, how does that change family dynamics and family expectations?
Yeah. And it plays a huge role. And then I was actually talking to somebody today about, like, my brother's in the Army. So do I join the Army? I was like, no, you join the Marine Corps to be better. And make fun of them.
Oh dear. But no, let's not open that up.
We did hit on this earlier. If there was some aspect of superheroes' love lives that you in particular were going to write about, what would be interesting enough to you that you'd want to write about it? Me, I've thought about this enough. I could fill a book. What's that?
I said I like the domestic stuff, kind of like the fluffy day-to-day stuff. Maybe that's just my sensibilities, but I think, because I don't know, I just find that cozy. So that would be my personal preference.
I think I would definitely want to know more about how they experience emotions, because if you think about how so many superheroes are not even like human, whatever, do you experience, like, what is even your emotional range? How do you experience emotions? What things do you value? Like, I would definitely be more into, like, when we talking about balance in relationships, what does that even mean to you? And what does that even look like? And is that even your goal in a relationship? Because we're sort of putting our own values as, I guess, I don't know, Western Homo sapiens on relationships where people in those relationships are not that. You know what I'm saying? And so I would definitely just want to know about experiences, values, and how does that impact the way that you relate to other people in your life.
I think that'd
Not
be
to
really
sound like a therapist or anything, but
I think really interesting to think about, because of, like, especially in our country, where so much is defined by what you do. As who you are. So trying to see that, like, hey, outside of this soup, this is who I am, and opening that up and finding time and balance. Like, no, I'm not going to go push this, like, nuke out of the way. I'm going to stay here or whatever.
I'd say I always go to grief and loss, but specifically just the burden of indebtedness to society. And so I have to do this because of, and a cause bigger than yourself. I feel like this is very reminiscent of a lot of, like, military work stuff, but the idea that when we say beat up the bad guys, we just see it as a fight and not realizing that these are lots and lots of deaths realistically. And so the burden of, I am having to do this, or I feel like I have to do this because someone else or something else is motivating me, is interesting.
When after I got my bachelor's, it was 2 years before I went to graduate school. A couple reasons. One, my wife needed to finish school, and the other was we thought we'd save money before graduate school. But I was a child abuse investigator. First, I was a case manager, but then I was an investigator. And there were weeks when I worked up to 70 hours on a flat salary. And I had a wife and two tiny children at home. And there are times when you still have to go out and investigate this case that just came to the police. You don't get to make that choice, and it has its repercussions, and it'll stay with you and nag at you. It just will. There are things now. It's like, I wish I could have done a little differently then, but how? The sheer amount of time. These are tough choices. I have one here I never read. It was from an earlier topic. Philip Nichols commented, "The Ray is an interesting gay character in the DC universe. Thoughts?" One of my thoughts is we have to go to a character that most people don't know about before we start talking about a gay male. Who's the most prominent gay male among the comic book superheroes? North Star has never been in a film or TV show.
Canonical?
Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, there are all kinds of the non-canon or alternate universe versions, but that's not what people think of as the character. For those that, I mean, Iceman now, and it had been teased over the years, like back when North Star had a crush on Iceman, and Iceman's like, "No, I'm straight," and then when they're speculating on whether Bobby Drake was gay or not, and somebody says, like, well, he's had relationships, and somebody point out not successful ones, and he's just because of those X-Men movies, he might be the best known gay male, but he wasn't presented as gay at all in those movies. He had his thing with Rogue, which he never had in comics.
Well, and I think that depends on if you go comics or movies, because like we talked about earlier with Deadpool or Loki, because those two would be the huge ones.
Yeah. And Loki could play with it in this upcoming series. Maybe we'll get to see that.
And they're queer and are often shown with women. So it would be great to have some dudes. Oh, that makes me think of Lucifer.
Oh, yeah.
I think 2 weeks from now when we're going to do our dueling Lucifers panel?
I don't know if it got better because I stopped watching a while back, but I remember it bugged me so much that like you would see Lucifer and like a dude would be getting out of bed with him, but like there would be no interaction. Mm-hmm. So it's like, hey, queers, hat tip, but that's all you get.
Yeah.
Or John Constantine.
Constantine.
Yeah, in the original Constantine series, which I think was on NBC, there was you saw where he'd been with a woman, and you didn't see much of his love life at all. You saw almost none of his love life. You did see that he'd definitely been with women, and there was nothing to indicate the bisexual side of his life. And maybe if it had gone on longer, they would have. NBC, I think, would have been reluctant to let them. Legends, they got into that pretty quickly. So when he joins Legends of Tomorrow, they indicated, so he's that's been his main relationship has been with a guy, and so
but they did none of that in the movie.
No, of course that's not the same character. That's just some characters, because I like them so much, I can't enjoy a version where you go, that's not that character. I am unable to watch Batman & Robin and enjoy it for laughs. I'm not able to. Constantine, I like that movie, actually. It's not the same character. It's just not the same character from the comics. But I like the movie in and of itself. And I was able, but I understand people who they couldn't get past that. Matt Ryan is just so good as Constantine. You'd think it was written based on him, not trying to go for, what was it, Billy Idol or Sting or some mix thereof when they originally drew him in the comics. It was one of those two. So Constantine, but thanks to Legends of Tomorrow, he is publicly known as a bisexual character. Bisexual.
Well, that's how it came out in the comics, right? Like it's the first comic he was in. He talked about like girlfriends and the odd boyfriend.
Probably one of his earliest references,
Yeah.
They never had a spell of presenting him as just a ladies' man. It was a bit before you really saw much of another side of his life. So we've got the bisexual John Constantine. We have nobody has jumped up yet to say, oh yeah, there's this obvious gay male superhero. So there's maybe it's that they're reluctant to tell the story. Maybe they think, oh, this won't work, or well, we tried it. Really, when did you try it? When did you really try to have one for people to follow? They decided the modern Batwoman could be gay,
but because from social constructs, a woman can be butch and therefore seen as more manly, more powerful, but a gay male superhero, well, he can't possibly be strong, powerful, whatever, which are some social constructs that can bite me, especially because it's 2021.
Of course
here we still are.
The whole world had less sex in 2020. Remember people speculating, will the birth rate go up because people are stuck at home with nothing to do? Or it's like, no, actually apparently the rates went down.
Not based on their families.
more divorces are coming out on my characters. I wonder if they'll do in like the Young Justice, right? Like now they introduced
The
Wicked.
cartoon.
Yeah, well, if they do the cartoon or like a live action, the like later on with the Young Justice League, or I'm sorry,
Teen Titans.
Young Avengers.
Oh, Young Avengers.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh yeah, because one of Wanda's kids is gay,
Wicked.
and I've missed a lot of recent stories, but somebody indicated the other one has been shown to be bi.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, I want to see those kids return, because I want to see more of the kids who actually played them in the show too, because they were so good.
Yes, they were.
Sure.
And we'll find more about that relationship. Like when she thanks them for choosing her to be her mom, it's like, what are they?
Yeah.
Somehow they really exist. That bit when she said that to them, that says there's something else. They're not just something she imagined up. She didn't turn somebody else's kids into her kids. Whatever they are, there is some reality to them. And we've got with them now, what, 4 of the Young Avengers characters? Yeah.
5, 4. Got those 2.
Those 2.
Hawkeye's daughter, right? Ant-Man's daughter.
Yeah, Ant-Man's daughter. That's the one. Yeah. And Isaiah Bradley's grandson.
Yeah.
Yep. Now Kate Bishop, not Hawkeye's daughter, but she'll be his apprentice. So she's going to be the one rather than his daughter. And Kate Bishop's going to be the star of the Hawkeye series. So that'll be 5 of them. 5 of the Young Avengers who have shown up one way or another. So it seems inevitable we'll get some version of that story, while people who don't know that comic book are going, what the hell are you talking about? All right, last comments, questions, insults before we head out. All right, because we'll be hitting more of this stuff when we do our other topics. And it's nice that we get to have these conversations, nice that we get to think about these things. I am thankful to Wizard for giving us this forum that we've had on a regular basis for a while. And it's good to see all of you.
Always good seeing you guys.
Thank you.
Good
Nice to meet you.
Nice to
Nice to
some
meet
of you. I
you.
haven't met before. See you on the internet.
All my friends have to get to know each other, so I don't have to tell anybody who I'm talking